Actually, Guillermo Gonzalez Aranda, they call me Guillermo. That name just kind of stuck with me from childhood because they couldn't pronounce Guillermo. I'm standing here. We're in 2015, April, probably about the 26th, 27th, 2015, in front of La Dualidad, the duality. And the concept for the duality, this mural came from the Mesoamerican philosophy of duality, the positive and the negative forces that exist and influence our lives daily, not just once in a while, but on a daily basis. And the duality was based on the two worlds, the positive and the negative, the world of Quetzalcoatl and the world of Tezcatlipoca. And they were brothers, and there was constant conflict of different energies, different forces. So Quetzalcoatl was the light, the positive, the creative. Tezcatlipoca was the darkness, the obscure, the negative, anger, hatred, those aspects of life, And so when we're angry, we fall into the world of Tezcatlipoca. When we feel love, compassion in our hearts, for something, then we're in the world of Quetzalcoatl. So there was a lot of iconology associated with each world. And I took these images, sprinkled them in images, and these symbols, which dealt with the natural world, okay, like the rabbit, the crocodile, the lizard, flint, bamboo, the dog, the deer. The deer would represent peace because it was a vegetarian. It didn't harm any other living life, and so that's kind of how the ancient people looked at it. So that's how. What I ended up doing was I started with those concepts, but I kind of brought them up to a contemporary level, contemporary to the times that we are existing. For instance, the monkey was supposed to represent inferior man, and the monkey became a half human, half machine being that, and I represented him like this image here of the person with the gas mask, oxygen mask, and one side of his body is human flesh, the other side is a mechanical machine. He's holding a cross. He's injecting himself with Christianity because if we're familiar with the history on this continent and the coming of the Spaniards and the monks, the friars, the missionaries, and the things that indigenous people went through, So and around him. Or on his arm, he also has a shield, which I refer to as the shield of technology. It's got gears, industrialization. The edge is ferrated. It's got the lines of coins. Economics, right? Enslavement. Today I believe we are. Economic slaves, we live and work, we pay our taxes, but we're just surviving economically. We're enslaved into an economic system. But on this shield you have Cuauhtemoc shackled down, symbolic of the destruction, or actually it's symbolic of how this society justifies the destruction indigenous people and the natural world, because they say this is for the advancement of civilization and industrialization, you know. So we justify the destruction of the natural world, like what's happening in South America with the grazing of cattle for profit and money, right? So that's what that symbolizes. At the same time, the sopilote, the vulture, is ripping out the heart, and I think that was more of a personal experience for mine, because when I became aware of what actually took place on this continent with the coming of the Spaniards and the Inquisition, it actually hurt. It hurt my heart, you know, to see, to know that we had, as a people, went through such atrocities, you know, and so that's what the buzzard and the ripping of the heart is. The jaguar up above is symbolic of Tezcatlipoca. That's his symbol, you know, the negative. And they use the jaguar because he's an animal of the night, you know, and we stay close to the fires and to each other because he created fear, and so that was the symbol that was used for Tezcatlipoca. Behind or below him and to the right of the inferior man, we have war, we have industrialization, we have the cities on fire, you know. Socially, the United States is and in particular San Diego is a war industry. If you look around and you see all the companies and businesses and corporations, you know, Roar, North Island, Convair, you know, they're all war industries. They're, you know, they profit from war. This society profits from war. So that's some of the symbols that are involved in there. Down to the bottom left here, you know, we have the rabbit, who is symbolic of fear, because the rabbit, if you're walking out in the hills and in the bush, you know, if you see a rabbit, as a rabbit sees you, man, he jams, he's gone, right? The crocodile, basking in the sun, laying around, unproductive, laziness, that's what he was, you know. To the left here, we have bamboo, carizo, which is empty inside, you know, so that was emptiness, our empty lives. And below it, this is supposed to represent flint, because it was sharp and also sterile, you know. There's a hand here, and this hand holds a torch, and there's a flame. And these flames are burning the feet of indigenous man culture, you know. And you can see hands in the carizo, in the bamboo, which is the agony and the pain that's been experienced by indigenous people of this continent. And this hand is our hand. It's you and it's me. Because if we're a part of this society, if we live in this society, if we work in this society, we're supporting it. And in supporting it, we're also contributing to the destruction of indigenous cultures and the natural world. So that's our role, even if we're unaware of it, you know, which so many of us are because of our struggle just to survive, you know. But in reality, we're a part of this machine that is destroying this culture. As we come to the center, up on top we have a cross and we have a God's eye, and in the center is lightning. And I found out at that time that lightning is created when hot and cold air masses come together. So it's actually an equalization. It's a way of balancing the atmosphere. So in some way I wanted to find how do we balance these things out between two worlds, the positive and the negative. You know, there has to be some way. I knew that for me, the culture and tradition gave me pride and dignity, you know, and self-respect as to who I am, because prior to understanding or even looking into our history, I was always I always felt, you know, we're treated very inferior, right? And so we begin to feel inferior. Our culture doesn't matter. We're dirty people. We're this, we're that, you know. And so we begin to feel these things within ourselves. And culture, traditions have given me a different perspective as to who we are as a people. And I think that we can feel dignity and pride knowing our culture and our history, you know. So that's where the danza comes in, the deer dancer. And, of course, I had to put zapata coming out from behind the fist, and different symbols. And then we have the skull down here, which is malinali. It is new life. So there's a transformation that is taking place right here. And then you have the tree of life coming up above it. I included different symbols, indigenous symbols like the thunderbird and the water bird, which the water bird is also symbolic for Native American church. So there we have ceremony and tradition. We have the blue deer among the Huichol, and my mother was from Nayarit, and she was of Cora and Huichol ancestry. And among the Huichol, there's a story of Huatacame. And Huatacame came across the people when they were still wandering around, unsettled, you know. And he showed them how to plant and cultivate crops, and that's how civilizations begin to establish themselves and flourish, you know. So, and Huatacame also means that it is symbolic of the good of the heart. And they say that everybody has Huatacame, and that's that good that we have within our hearts. Just below Huatacame, we have the lizard. Now that lizard is fertility, the opposite of flint, which was sterile. And then as we go up, there's a escudo for the Centro Cultural. We had, that's the symbol with the ceramic heart right there in the center of a stylized butterfly. And that symbol, you find it on the Gigantes of Tulac. The Toltecas was a civilization that existed. The only thing that remains is their art, their pottery, their painting, their sculpture. So the word Tolteca became synonymous with master craftsmen, you know, artists. And that's also the name that we took as artists here at the Centro Toltecas in Aztlán, because we're here in Aztlán, the southwest, the mythical homeland of the Aztec or the Mexica people. So we developed that symbol with the Quinto Sol, the 5 heads of the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, the positive, the creative aspect of life. While I was working on it, the moonstone was dug up. The woman here was dug up in Mexico City. And we had a moon with the man in the moon kind of a profile in it at that time. And when I heard we were working on this mural, and when somebody brought me the newspaper of this moonstone being uncovered, so we changed the man in the moon into Coatlicue, the moonstone, because that's, you know, what was happening at that time. Above her, there's an old man, an elder. That's Black Elk. He's from the Lakota. We were developing Chicano studies at San Diego State, you know, and we were reading a lot of books that dealt with native and traditional ways. And there was one book, Black Elk Speaks, and he talked about the sacred pipe and just tradition and ceremony again. And being that we're so detached, or we were so detached from Mexico at that time, in order to begin to understand indigenous ways, we made alliances with different native peoples from this area. And that's how we got introduced to the Sweat Lodge and different things like that. And so we begin to incorporate some of that philosophy, some of those traditions in our lives. And then the Morning Star, the nine-pointed, somehow we came across a nine-pointed Morning Star with the kind of a color wheel inside of it, and that's because of our as artists and how we live our lives. So this center section was supposed to be kind of a lead into understanding and balancing our lives in a dual society. You know, we live in two worlds, right? And sometimes we fall one way or we go the other way. So some of the symbols, like even the eagle feather or the colors of the four directions that we find on the deer dancer, were very symbolic to us at that time. We're learning. It was a time of education. You know, this wall went through so many changes because we were constantly learning different things. You know. And so we wanted to make everything as correct as we could. Coming to the right into the world of Quetzalcoatl, you know, and some of these symbols like Malinali and the lizard were positive, creative symbols. But we also put a little scene here because we had begun to learn about the Sweat Lodge, the Temescal, the Purification Lodge, and we had built a small one behind my house. We were living in Encanto, and so we covered it with sarapes, with whatever we could find, you know, and we had built an adobe kind of oven pit so that we could have a fire in the city without being harassed by the fire department. If you notice across the bottom and from the left, we have the body of Quetzalcoatl coming, kind of tying the whole image in, the whole mural together as one. And he comes across, and then he zooms in, and boom, we have this sculpture of Quetzalcoatl, and it's based on some of the old sculptures that we had seen on the pyramids or from Mexico, ancient Mexico. The double-headed eagle up on top also comes from Huichol beadwork or yarn work. And I put the wings of the huelga bird, you know, the great boycott was happening, so that symbol was very, very present throughout those years, you know, when we're developing our consciousness about what's going on with the farm workers and just in society as it regards indigenous people, Mexicanos, Chicanos, you know. There's a little kiva up on top of that pyramid, and the kiva was that sacred house, you know. That's where that ceremony and the culture and traditions are preserved. And we saw the centro here because it's round, and it used to be completely open. We saw it as that kiva in the modern city, you know, where we're trying as artists, trying to re-educate ourselves and our communities about our culture and our traditions of who we really are. We're not Hispanic, we're not Latinos, you know, we call ourselves Chicanos, you know, and somebody had defined, you know, what's a Chicano, and I remember saying, well, you know, a Chicano is a Mexican with an attitude, you know? We're not sitting still, you know? There's something going on, and we need to find out what's going on, and we need to remedy it, you know? And so through culture and tradition, this was our way as artists, not just visual artists, but dancers, poets, sculptors, you know, every type of art that you could think of. The pyramid, 3 levels, which deals with the mind, the body, and the spirit, you know. We don't nourish all 3, you know. And it's something that I think that we need to do, you know, consciously throughout our lives. There's 2 gigantes de Tula up on both sides of the pyramid, and we put those there because we identified with the gigantes de Tulas as Toltecas and Aztlan, and that's where we got that little symbol that's on the chest of it that went into the emblem for the centro. To the left of the pyramid, we have the sacred pipe. We were being introduced, as I mentioned earlier, to the sweat lodge, to the sacred pipe. There was a unity caravan that came through San Diego at that time, and there was a 4-day gathering that took place in the Cuca Ranch. And that was in the early, I believe like 1970. We had just gotten into the centro. And that's where a lot of us were introduced to the sweat lodge and getting to learn about the pipe and just the traditions and culture and how indigenous people were trying to unify. During that time, there was a lot of things happening, not just with Chicanos, but with blacks and whites and Asians. So I felt that that was a very important symbol to be in there. Across to the right, we have the corn, teo gently, sacred grain, you know, the basis of a culture, you know. It was the substance that nourished people, you know, and that's why it was considered very sacred. To the top right, there's a story about the hummingbird and how hummingbird brought fire down to the people so that they could keep warm, so that they could cook their food, you know. And we continue to use fire. Even electricity is like a fire. Atomic bombs is a fire. You know, we misuse it, but originally it was brought by the hummingbird in order to help the 2-legged people, you know, because they were wandering, they were lost, they were in darkness. So it brought light, it brought heat, you know, and it was able to assist us in nourishing ourselves. To the far top right, we have Olim, and it has 4 directions, you know, the 4 cardinal points. To the sides and to the bottoms, it also has symbols of the duality, that balance. And then down below, and the 4 seasons, you know, we have the 4 seasons, the 4 cardinal points, the duality encompassed in that symbol. And below it, we have the owl. The owl, the guardian of the night, you know, because the night is holy too, you know. So many of us fear the night, and but the night is sacred, you know. And, to the bottom right, we have this like a ledge, like we're standing on a ledge, you know. And I call that the abyss. In the books of Carlos Castañeda, he talked about Carlos having to make a decision. He had to jump off this cliff, off this ledge, you know, and trust that he was going to survive. So this abyss is to me is very symbolic. Like, we had to experience a lot of things in our lives that that were new to us, that were different to us. And in some cases, we were afraid to take that step. But if we don't take that step, if we don't step off that ledge, we'll never experience those things in our lives. We'll never resolve those issues that we have to. You know, we have to step forward. We have to step off that ledge. We have to jump into the abyss in order to remedy and resolve all these things. And for me, it's a lot about renewing and giving new life to ourselves, to our communities, our families. In the center, also here we have the woman with the wings, you know. We live in an oppressive society when it comes to women. We used to have matriarchal societies, you know. It was the women that made the decisions in some of our tribes as to whether we go to war or not, you know. Is that issue that important that it's worth losing your son or your husband, you know? How important is it that we need to go and have conflict among ourselves, you know? Because survival, you know, we depended on the men to hunt or to gather or whatever it is. It had to be something serious, you know. You know, we didn't just go and have war because we're short on oil or we need the natural resources from somebody else in another place across this world, you know, this continent or this planet. So, you know, nowadays it's corporations that decide whether we're going to go to war or not. And they send our young men off. Well, in the matriarchal societies, it was a woman, you know, and the woman was valued, you know. It's not like today, you know. I tell some people, you know, if you really want to know how our societies function, you get the values of this society today, you know, and you just flip it over. You know, we live in a world that's about the individual right now, you know. You flip it over, and we're talking about community, you know. There's a lot of disrespect for the woman. You flip it over in indigenous societies, you find that there's a lot of respect for the woman, you know. So that's what the image of woman, and that's that freedom, that symbolic flight of spirit that is being released. So this is more or less the symbology of a lot of these images, and I know that there's probably more things in there that I have forgotten to mention, but they're there, you know. And like I said, it took me 15 years to finally realize that I'll never be done with it. You know, I worked on it for like 15 years. I realized it'll never be done because it was based on my understanding as I'm educating myself on the philosophy and the culture and traditions of my ancestors. I'm constantly learning, and there's so much that I'm not going to learn it all in my lifetime. And so I had to reach that point after 15 years that I had to accept it where it was at and understand that it'll never really be completed, you know. But I had to find a point where I could comfortably step back from it. And so that's la dualidad, the duality, you know. So.
Tell me a little bit about some of the artists that worked with you on the mural.
Guillermo Rosset Chavez, he was a young man just coming around. Ernesto Paul was 15 years old when he came here and, you know, started helping me out. David Avalos, OG, Jaime Enrique, A lot of them were young people. I was a little bit older because I had gone 4 years in the military service, and then I had gone to college afterwards. So I was a few years older than a lot of these guys. Few years, 4 or 5 years difference. But most of them were young, aspiring artists, and this was their first opportunity. Arturo Roman, David Avalos, Armando Núñez, Salvador Barajas, Rubén de Anda, you know, these were guys that assisted me and supported me in the mural world. So.